Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, the direct route to PMP exam success. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, where we give you more than just the basics to get ready for the PMP exam. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. In this lesson, our focus is on project baselines. Every project should have at least one plan, and you should compare your project against that plan. And baselines are an important tool which are used to analyze the actual performance of the project against that plan. Baselines are compared against the current performance metrics to determine if the project is executing according to plan. They are used to monitor and control various aspects of the project throughout its life cycle. We are going to begin by reviewing the PMBOK Guide's definition of the term baseline. Then we look at some important baselines to various projects, and then we jump into a few specific ones that you may even use on your own project. We explain why we have baselines, the importance of baselines, and how they are used to monitor and control projects. And finally, we discuss conditions where we will rebaseline a project and also conditions in which we will not. Here is the definition of what a baseline is. It is the approved version of a work product that can be changed only through formal change control procedures and is used as a basis for comparison. Generally, the baseline refers to the current baseline, but it may refer back to the original or some other baseline as well. It's important to understand that a baseline is an approved plan for a project, plus or minus approved changes. When you originally plan your project, you draw a line in the sand and provide an estimate of what the budget or the schedule are going to look like at a point in time. As the project progresses, things change. New information becomes available. As circumstances change, you may need to change your baseline, which we call rebaselining, but only if you receive approval for the proposed changes. Here are some of the names of the baselines that you may find on your project and also as you prepare for the PMP exam. First of all, the cost baseline, then there is the schedule baseline, the scope baseline. We also have the performance measurement baseline. Next, the product baseline, the cash baseline, and finally, the technical baseline. The last three, they aren't really discussed in the PMBOK guide. They're also less common than the first four, so we won't be looking at the last three in detail, but we'll look at the first four in more detail in just a bit. Generally speaking, the baselines are doing all the same thing. They help you to properly measure and manage your project by comparing your original plan, the baseline, to your current actual performance. Now that we understand the concept behind baselines and we've seen the long list of names of baselines we could have, let's take a look at a few details of the first four baselines in this list, beginning with the cost baseline here. So a cost baseline is a specific version of the time-phased budget, which is used to compare actual expenditures to planned expenditures. Planned expenditures obviously being your baseline. This is what we set out to be spending, and actual expenditures, obviously the money that has left our pocket. And we do this in order to determine if either preventive or corrective actions are needed to meet the project objectives in regards to our cost. Next, we have the schedule baseline, which is an approved version of your schedule model that is, of course, used to compare actual results to the plan, just as we do it with any other plan, meaning that the planned schedule is your baseline and the actual schedule is what's really going on in terms of time being spent on your project. And why do we do this? Well, we do this in order to determine, here we go again, if preventive or corrective action is needed to meet the project objectives in regards to the schedule. Are you already seeing some kind of a trend here in regards to the baseline descriptions? Final note on this one. The schedule baseline, by the way, will also tell you when costs will be incurred, because it tells you when and in which order schedule activities are going to occur. And since we have to pay, for example, resources that are going to be working on these activities, that means that the schedule baseline allows us to determine when the expenditures, when the cost will happen. That's the reason why we use the schedule baseline as an input to the plan cost management process. It allows us to see when cost will occur. And then we have the scope baseline, and this one is different than the two baselines which we have looked at so far, because this is not just a single document, because instead it consists of three components. That much said, the scope baseline is an approved, specific version of the detailed scope statement, the work breakdown structure, and its associated WBS dictionary. Again, the common theme, as with all project baselines, is that it is used to compare actual results to the plan to determine if preventive or corrective action is needed to meet our project objectives in regards to scope. And this common theme is really also the answer to the question of why do we even have baselines? Well, we use them to draw a line in the sand. This is how we say our project is supposed to go. And then the baseline is used to perform an analysis and to compare current performance against the expected level for various parameters of a project. The baseline is the accepted and approved plan and its related documents, and baselines are mostly approved by the project management team and key stakeholders and are used to measure and control various project activities. A few facts that are common to all baselines are that baselines are approved and cannot simply be changed. Baselines are outputs of planning stages and are referred to and updated during execution and monitoring and controlling process groups. Baselines enable a project manager to understand the project progress by analyzing the baseline versus the actual performance and help forecast the project outcome. Baselines are important inputs to a number of project processes, and the outputs of a process can initiate a change request for a baseline. When a baseline is changed, we call it rebaselining. It's important to emphasize for the PMP exam that the cost baseline, scope baseline, and schedule baseline are extensively mentioned and discussed throughout the PMBOK guide, and they are explicitly listed as being part of the project management plan. And then we have the Performance Measurement Baseline, or PMB. This is an approved baseline that integrates the scope, schedule, and cost plans. It is used to compare executed project work against your original plan in order to measure and manage project performance. The PMB may also provide technical and quality parameters. In regards to the PMP exam, you must remember that the performance measurement baseline is used in connection with earned value. For instance, when we talk about the numbers behind earned value and we say that it is $100,000, then that is information that is relating back to the performance measurement baseline. This means really that earned value numbers can never be bigger as what you find in the PMB. Here's an important little detail for you to remember as you are preparing for the PMP exam. The performance measurement baseline includes the contingency reserve, but it excludes the management reserve. You may want to commit this one here to memory because it is sometimes used as the answer to PMP exam sample questions, in books or in simulators online. So we've heard a couple of times already that we may need to rebaseline a project. Let's therefore clearly define what rebaselining means and why and how it's done, so that we're talking all about the same thing here. So rebaselining means that you have an approved change in your scope, schedule, budget, and that the related baselines are then updated to reflect that particular change. Rebaselining is done when the information that you currently have on your project has matured or changed enough from the prior baseline to warrant an update. Rebaselining is accomplished by obtaining approval, changing the prior baseline, and issuing the new baseline, which is then used for future comparisons. Important to note is that at the very beginning of a project, there is a lot of uncertainty, so the baseline is really only a ballpark estimate at that point. As things develop, you start to remove some of the uncertainty. For example, the concept for the project might change, resource availability might change, cost might go up, and so on. Or for long projects with a high level of uncertainty, you might agree up front that you will rebaseline at certain critical points when key decisions are made or when you get within a certain time of activities. Let's now take a closer look at when and why we should be rebaselining our projects, and we're going to do this by opening a number of reference books to review when the authors say that rebaselining is appropriate. The first book is Streetwise Project Management by Michael Singer Dobson, and he offers 3 basic rebaselining situations. The first situation is when there is an imposed change or scope creep occurs. An imposed change would mean that you have received a change request that is substantial. A change request from your customer or some scope creep is not common over time. At a certain point, it becomes evident that the baseline needs to be changed to reflect the change in circumstances. The second situation that provokes rebaselining is when internal changes or variances occur. For instance, the execution of your project hasn't been as good or as bad as you thought it would be. There is no point in keeping a baseline going if the baseline does not accurately reflect what's really happening on your project. And finally, the author also talks about circumstantial and environmental changes that may require a rebaselining. For instance, a change in government regulations may require you to update your baseline to include new regulations as part of your project. Now let's discuss the process of rebaselining, and let's use the example of rebaselining the performance measurement baseline, which you would do if it no longer represents the plan or significant variances were being reported. So the project manager, in consultation with the project sponsor, will rebaseline the project using the following steps. First of all, make a clear declaration of the scope that is to be baselined in the new baseline. For the scope in the first baseline, your original baseline said the earned value baseline 1 equals to planned value baseline 1. All unearned planned value goes to the second baseline and applies to the scope moved to the second baseline. Note that the setting of the planned value equals to the earned value at the end of the PMB1 resets the schedule, and value variance is now 0. The cost variance remains unchanged in PMB1 and for the project as a whole. The planned value moved to the second baseline is then decomposed into a second WBS and a second PMB, a second performance measurement baseline, is fashioned. The second WBS does not need to be structured the same way as the first WBS, but the scope that moves should be mapped from WBS1 to WBS2. Sounds complicated? That's okay, because it's important to mention that even though we've looked at this particular process here from John Goodpasture's book, it's outside of the PMP exam. But we wanted to show you anyway how this can be done, how you can take a performance measurement baseline 1 and turn it into a performance measurement baseline 2. This one here is probably just common sense, but we wanted to mention it anyway. According to the book Project Management Professional Study Guide Deluxe Edition, you should never re-baseline a schedule without first saving a copy of the original baseline and schedule. You may need to reference the original baseline at some future point in time. So take care when rebaselining a project schedule because you may lose the original baseline information. Why do you care? Because the original baseline serves as historical information to reference for future projects. Make a backup copy of the original schedule so that you have a record of the original baseline as a reference. Even though some project management software allows you to have several baselines plus the original, it's still good practice to make a backup copy of the original. Some strategies for dealing with poor estimates are provided by J. Davidson Frame, the author of The New Project Management: Tools for an Age of Rapid Change, Complexity and Other Business Realities. He says that first we must answer why there are problems. Is it an instance of poor execution or perhaps unrealistic estimates at the outset? If the problem reflects poor execution, inexperienced workers, sloppy planning, poor change control, then our solution must focus on tightening execution. But if they reflect built-in overruns caused by bad estimates, then the estimates must be revisited through rebaselining. So without knowing where the problem is coming from, you shouldn't be rebaselining, because if it's just because of poor execution, do not rebaseline. Only rebaseline if we have built-in overruns caused by bad estimates. But in either case, your project is hopelessly bogged down in a cost and schedule quagmire, and serious thought must also be given to rescoping, project management jargon for changing the plan to match reality, really. This may entail adding additional budget to the project or cutting back on planned tasks, or both. And the final book we want to open up in regards to rebaselining is Neil Witten's Let's Talk: More No-Nonsense Advice for Project Success. It suggests the following about the frequency of rebaselining a project plan. A project plan should be re-evaluated once every month or two. If this assessment causes major dates in the project plan to change, then you should also rebaseline the plan. Of course, if a project is only days or weeks in duration, then you cannot pause to re-evaluate the project plan every 1 or 2 months. But for these shorter projects, there typically should not be a need to routinely re-evaluate them anyway. Let's review. In project management, a baseline is a planned state. We draw a line in the sand and we say, this is what we think our project is going to look like, and this is what we will measure ourselves against. So actual performance as we move forward is measured against this original baseline. Then, from time to time, we must go back and we must evaluate our baselines and see if they are still valid. If they are not, if we had internal performance issues, for example, we may need to rebaseline. A major change request may require a change in your baseline, and once you have rebaselined, that means that your future project performance is now measured against your new baseline. And this concludes our look at the project baselines. Let's try this on a PMP exam sample question that you may find in a book or an online simulator. In fact, this is almost sort of the standard question that you'll find when it comes to rebaselining. The question is, which is an acceptable cause for rebaselining a $10 million project? Is it A, the client has authorized a 100,000 addition to the scope of the project? Is it B, the contractor's company has instituted a quality program in which it has pledged to spend $1 million during the next year? Is it C, the productivity in the drafting department is lower than anticipated, which has resulted in 1,000 additional hours over what was budgeted? Or is it D, the engineering department has converted to a new CAD system that costs us $200,000? Which one would you say it is? I'll give you a few seconds here. The answer is, of course, that it is A. The client has authorized a $100,000 addition to the scope of the project. Why would you want to do it there? Because just on the previous slide we have heard that it has to be a major change request that may lead to a change in your baseline. Well, A is the correct answer because the client approved the change. The other situations were not agreed to or built in cost overruns. So even though A is not really a major change on a $10 million project, this is the best answer because it's the only authorized change that we are having here as answers. The integrated change control process is performed from project inception through project completion. Change control is necessary because projects seldom run exactly according to project management plans. The project management plan, the project scope statement, and other deliverables, you must maintain them by carefully and continuously managing changes, either by rejecting changes or by approving changes. So those approved changes are then incorporated into a revised baseline. And this concludes our lesson on the baselines. So, Justine, what is it this time?
Hold the fort down, will ya?
Until next time.